So, what happens when your grandfather is a national hero? I mean, a figure so huge they call him the Tiger of Bengal. How on earth do you carve out your own legacy? Well, that's exactly the story of A.K. Flora. She's a social entrepreneur and a writer who's found a really powerful way to honor her family's past while forging a totally new path of service. Let's get into it.
You know, this one quote really gets to the heart of her entire mission. Her grandfather's title, Sher-e-Bangala, uses the Urdu word for tiger, but Banglar Bagh, that's pure Bengali. It seems like a small change, right? But it's this incredibly powerful shift. It's a nod to the past, for sure, but it's firmly planted in a new, distinct, modern Bengali identity.
Okay, so to really get what she's doing today, we have to follow her whole journey. We're going to start with the incredible legacy she was born into, then dive into the unique family values that shaped her. We'll follow her as she moves across the world and see how one trip back home sparked this whole new mission. Then, we'll look at what her foundation actually does and the philosophy that ties it all together.
First things first, let's unpack this legacy. We're talking about her grandfather, the legendary Sher-e-Bangla A.K. Fazl Huk, who was the very first Prime Minister of undivided Bengal. And this wasn't just some distant political title. It was a legacy of service that was passed right down through her father, who was also a minister. It was basically the air she breathed growing up.
This slide tells such a great story. So Nehru, who had actually been her grandfather's political advisor, was now Prime Minister of India. When Nehru was too busy for a meeting, he sent flowers as an apology. Now, instead of getting offended, Sher-e-Bangla sent them right back with this message. It's just so clever, so dignified, it gives you a real sense of the kind of powerful, yet graceful presence he must have had.
To really understand this family, you have to get their political philosophy. Both her grandfather and her father served under different governments. Now, some people might look at that and call it opportunism. But Flora explains that their guiding principle, their North Star, was always country over party. The belief was simple. To actually help people, you have to be in a position to make change, no matter what party flag is flying.
But this legacy, it wasn't just political. It was also deeply, deeply cultural. So let's take a look at the incredible household that really shaped A.K. Flora's worldview from a super young age.
Just try to picture this environment. Her grandmother from northern India brings Hindi and Urdu into the home. Her mother is a professionally trained folk singer. Her father is writing and directing plays for the neighborhood kids. This was a home where deep religious faith and a huge love for the arts weren't seen as opposites. They were just woven together, part of the same fabric. And all of this on a beautiful 5-acre property that sounds like it was its own little magical world.
And get this, here's a fantastic little piece of history. You know the kachi biryani that is so incredibly popular in Bangladesh today? Well, according to Flora, her grandfather was the very first person to bring the specialized chefs all the way from Calcutta to Dhaka just to cook it. It's a small detail, but it just perfectly shows how this family's influence is literally woven into the culture.
Of course, to really build your own identity, sometimes you have to leave home. This next chapter is all about Flora's journey abroad, where she really stepped out from under the massive shadow of her family's political life and started carving out her own space.
She was the first in her immediate family to go study overseas. I mean, that's a huge step. Her time in New York, especially interning at the UN's Refugee Agency, was a game changer. It gave her this global perspective on humanitarian work. And from there, she built a life in the US, married a scientist, and raised her kids, seemingly a whole world away from her roots in Bangladesh.
But, you know, the pull of home is a powerful thing. And this right here is the major turning point in our story. After so many years away, a trip back to her ancestral region sparked this profound realization, one that would change the entire direction of her life. Just think about that number for a second. 27 years. That's how long it had been since she'd last set foot in her ancestral home in Barisal. A whole lot can change in almost 3 decades. And what she saw, well, it hit her hard.
So what was it? What did she see? After all that time, coming back with fresh eyes, what was the one single critical problem that stood out above everything else? The one thing that made her feel like she had to act?
The answer was jobs. Simple as that. She saw all these incredibly bright, talented, driven young people with nowhere to go, no opportunities, no clear path forward. That lack of employment, all that wasted potential, that became her #1 focus. And this observation is what directly led to her creating her foundation.
So that brings us to the what. What did she actually decide to do about it? This section is all about her foundation, Bangalore Bog, and the very real, tangible ways it's trying to tackle these massive challenges.
First, let's circle back to the name. As we talked about, Bangalore Bog is so intentional. It absolutely honors that Tiger of Bengal legacy, but it reclaims it, brings it home, in pure Bengali. It's like saying, this is a new chapter, deeply connected to the old one, but it's speaking a language of its own.
The foundation's work stands on these 5 pillars, but notice, they aren't just the obvious things. Under health, they're taking on mental health and postpartum depression, topics that are so often swept under the rug. In education, they're focused on preschool for the most underprivileged kids to give them a real shot. And it all connects, empowering women, creating jobs, and even preparing for environmental disasters. It's a really holistic way of looking at things.
Now, when it comes to empowering women, Flora has a very, very sharp perspective. She actually uses this famous line from George Orwell's Animal Farm to make a point about a really complex reality in Bangladesh.
And this visual just explains her point perfectly. On the one hand, you have the public sphere, jobs, education, where it looks like women are making incredible progress. But Flora argues the real battle for equality is happening in the private sphere, behind the closed doors of the home. True freedom, she says, is when a woman has equality there, not just in her workplace.
So finally, what's the big idea that ties all this work together? In our last section here, we're going to explore the core beliefs that really drive AK Flora and her vision for the future of her homeland.
For her, it really all boils down to human connection. She tells this beautiful little story about being on a boat when a vendor came up to sell mats, and he started talking to her sister, who was fast asleep. There was just this simple, honest, unfiltered humanity in that little moment. And she believes that before you can have any grand strategy or policy, you have to first understand that simple love and connection between people. That's the real engine of change.
She also has this really powerful vision for the national identity. She argues that the country's true strength lies in embracing its dual heritage. Being Bengali and being Muslim are not in conflict. Wearing a cultural tip on your forehead doesn't make you less Muslim, and wearing a religious hijab doesn't make you any less Bengali. She's calling for a solid, inclusive identity where people can be fully and proudly both without any confusion.
And we're going to end on this. This quote from the philosopher Allama Iqbal was a favorite in her family. Elevate yourself to such a height that before every decree of destiny, God himself asks you, tell me, what is your will? It's just this profound call to action, to self-actualization, to become so good, so purposeful, that you essentially become a co-creator of your own destiny. And when you look at her journey, that seems to be the very legacy AK Flora is trying to build right now.